Moshe Shapiro, Zecharin Levrocha, he has a point. The Mishnah tells us in Rosh Hashanah, there are four Rosh Hashanahs during the year. Pesach is Rosh Hashanah, where God decides how much wheat the world will receive. Shavuos is when God decides how much fruit the trees will bear. On Sukkot, Hashem decides whether it's going to be Gishmei Brocha, there'll be rains of blessing. And on Rosh Hashanah, which is the first day of Tishrei, over the front of Moro, all human beings pass before Hashem Kinei Moro. What is the Minei Moro? So there's a question in the Gemara what that means. Either means when a person counts sheep, and every 10th sheep you identify as Meiser, and just identifying as the 10th sheep, it automatically takes on a consecrated status. Masa has the same status as a Shlomim. Or Kinei Moro means a person is going up a mountain pass, and there's a very narrow path, and only one person is able to go at the path one at a time. That's Kinei Moro, that each person is individualized. Or Kinei Moro means that the people who were conscripted into David's army, each one was evaluated based on his pedigree, whether he was qualified to be conscripted or not. So B'nai Moro is emphasizing the individuality of the person. So he asks a question, why when we speak about Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, we speak about the wheat, the fruit, and the water, and we don't say on Rosh Hashanah, man is judged for life or death. It's what we say in the Masada Tokef. Mi l'chaim, mi l'moves. Who will live, will die, and how will you live, how will you die, so on and so forth. Who will be wealthy, who will be poor, who will die an instantaneous death, a person will die prematurely. So why, when we speak about other things, we speak about the events, and when we speak about Rosh Hashanah, when the person is judged, we speak about how the individual is seen. So he says something very profound. He says, and he mentioned the concept, the name of the Ramchal, name of Maral many times, and it's cited in other works, Kabbalistic works, that when we speak about Yom Tovim, which are referred to as Moadim, including Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, they're not purely commemorative, but rather whatever took place at that moment in history, the same energies or powers are released and they're replicated on that particular day. For instance, Egypt, when we left Egypt, and we went from bondage to freedom. Pesach night, the forces are released by Hashem to bring about the same result. And we discussed that's the reason why many things we do at the Seder are purely rabbinical, only to create a vessel that we should be beneficiaries of those forces. And that's why we say a Jew has to see himself at the Seder as if he personally left Egypt. Because the more you relate to the event, the more you are a beneficiary of those forces. Shavuos is Zman Man Torah Seinu, Hashem gave the Torah. So the same forces that brought about that level of Kedusha to the world and to the Jewish people that we were established, that same connection to Hashem takes place on Shavuos and Sukkot, is the Am Yaakov, the clouds of glory, and so on and so forth. So he says, when we blow the shofar, what do we say? The human being was created on the sixth day of creation, Adam Arishon. And we say when we blow shofar, Hare Haras Olam. Today is the birth of the world. The world, the creation started 5 days earlier. But the sixth day, when man came on scene, that was the creation of the world. That's the birth of the world, because the value of existence is the human being. So Adam was created on the sixth day. The Mishnah tells us in Sanhedrin that before a person was put to death through the testimony of witnesses, the witnesses were told before they would testify, after God created man, created him as an individual, wasn't created as a pair, a husband, a male and female. Adam Nivra Yehidi. A human being was created as an individual without a counterpart. Why? To teach Adam understanding, he should appreciate that when he came into existence, he was the only living creature of his species. Bishvili Nivra Olam. The world was created for me, all this existence. And he understood, as it says in Yutro, the Gemara tells us that a child sees from one end of the world to the other. Adam had a level of clarity. He appreciated every aspect of creation, and he understood its value. And he said, all this value was created just for me. That means each person who comes onto this earth, he has a purpose that every aspect of creation has relevance to him. His purpose is to utilize existence, every aspect of existence, to address his individuality, his singularity of what his purpose is all about. This is the concept. So what happens in Rosh Hashanah? Every year on Rosh Hashanah, the same forces that brought about Adam, the creation of man, which is the purpose of existence, every human being is seen as an individual, because every human being is the Adam. And the question Hashem has is, are you meeting that objective of individuality of Adam that has relevance to all existence? So the more you relate to Adam and understand that your purpose, Adam's value is because the whole existence has relevance to you. It was created for you for a purpose. So let's say a person lives for that purpose. That means you're actually functioning in the capacity of Adam, which was the original intention of God. So therefore you become a beneficiary of those forces. But let's say a person does not live for that purpose. He lives for himself. And it's the equivalent of embezzlement of forces. He has no relevance to what that purpose is. So now God's decision, what kind of year that person will have is based on his individuality. Is this the Adam? Does he meet the profile of Adam that I created this world for? And if he does, therefore, the following year has relevance to him. And to what degree does it have relevance to him? And if he does not, then it becomes another type of verdict. And that's only a consequence. The result is Chaim Modus. But that's why the Mishnah tells us that passed before him, moral. People pass before God on that individual basis, the individuality of Adam. This is the concept. So now, the takeoff ways, I have to speak tonight. I'm being late with my grandson's bar mitzvah, my daughter's her oldest child's bar mitzvah. A parent has a child. Now the question is, when God created the human being, what did he create the human being? So I always mention the name of the Rav Kalatsky. There's a pasuk, Olam Chesed Yiboneh. Hashem created this world purely based on Chesed. He had no incentive, no reason to create the world. God owes nothing to anyone. God in his own right is absolutely perfect on the absolute level. So why did he create the human being? So the Rav Kalatsky explains, because God is the essence of good on the absolute level. Good does good. So God wanted there should be a being who should be a beneficiary of the ultimate good. Therefore, he created the human being, but that was the ultimate chesed. It's not reward, it's chesed. So therefore, he created the human being, that the human being should be the beneficiary of that. So in what way are you the beneficiary of that absolute good? If you fulfill the purpose of Yochid, of Adam is the individual who's all by himself. Your purpose is to utilize existence to reflect the individuality. As Hashem is Echad, you have to be Echad. You have to address that individuality, that singularity of who you are. So if God gives us a child, and you understand what the value of that child, what is their value? It has infinite value. All existence, it's like when the court says to the witnesses, you have to understand the ramifications of your testimony. God forbid, if it's not accurate, you have to actually remove yourself, because you have to understand the consequence of taking this human being. The whole world exists for his purpose. His individuality is relevant to every aspect of this existence. So when a person is given a child and brings a child, parents into this world, what is their responsibility? They were given a gift of something which has infinite value. All creation was created for that individual. And you want to meet criteria and develop that profile of that individuality that has relevance to all existence. That is the responsibility of a parent. And the more we understand how invaluable that is, for instance, a person has a diamond and he could afford that 100-carat deep flawless diamond. What type of insurance does he take? What kind of vault does he put it into? Because he appreciates the value of that deep flawless diamond, he has to take that amount of insurance to protect it, if anything should happen, and put it in a safe location that it can't be stolen. So we have to take every level of responsibility and caution and mentor that child to meet the standard that Hashem wants, because in God's eyes, that is the most valuable creation. And on Rosh Hashanah, we have to ask ourselves that question, even regarding ourselves. Have we met the criteria of that individuality, of that yechidus? And he says something interesting also. When a person leaves this world and you go to the world to come, you're all by yourself. As a human being, we have social relationships, we have family relationships. But that's not what it's all about. Because when you leave this world, you're all by yourself. It's you and God. It's all based on your record, what you accomplished. When man was created, he came as an individual. Nobody else existed other than himself. When you leave this world, you're all by yourself. And you got to stand on your own 2 feet, and your record is you're responsible for that record. So therefore, Rosh Hashanah, we have to ask ourselves the question, have we met that objective of individuality that the world has relevance to our purpose? If it does, that means you met the prerequisite and the objective of creation, so the verdict will be based on that. If God forbid a person is not, that means this person is not Adam. So the recreation of Adam this person has no relevance to that. As a result of that, Chas v'Shalom, the verdict to be not a good verdict for that reason. That's what he speaks about. So Elul we spoke about as Ani L'Dodi V'Dodi Li. Elul is, I am for my beloved and my beloved is for me. That if we take initiatives, that we have to, as it says in the Chazal, Tiftach li Pesach machat. You open for me an opening as much as the eye of a needle or the needle point. I will open you an opening as a large room, meaning we only have to take a slight degree of initiative. We take the slight initiative, Hashem opens vistas for us and assists us to be able to advance to great heights. And we have to understand that. That's alluded in the letters Elu Ani L'Dodi Dodi Li. But I brought out something else. The Ramban, we had learned early in the Parsha, not in this Parsha, the previous Parshas, the Moshe Rabbeinu says, at the end of time, Hashem will circumcise your hearts and the hearts of your children, of your sons. Hashem es levavcha aleph lamid ulevav zarecha. Ulevav, that's lamed. Es levav, aleph lamed. So we have Elul. So that's an illusion that a person has to do tshuva during Elul. Hashem will circumcise the foreskin of your heart. What's the foreskin of the heart? Foreskin of the heart is referring to the Yitzhara, the evil inclination. That's the covering of the heart. That's the delusion or the deception or the distortion of reality due to our inclination to the evil inclination. So I said one time, the Ramban writes that pasuk is speaking about after the coming Mashiach, where all evil will come to an end. And it'll be a time that there's no longer reward and punishment. Because the only reason why there's reward and punishment is because we have the ability to make a choice in either direction. But once evil comes to an end, after Mashiach comes, our actions will not be deserving of reward and punishment, because a person will not sin, and the mitzvah we do will be done naturally, because a person has no reason to act differently, and naturally he'll do the will of God. So I pointed out, why is Elul alluded to in that particular, those words? To tell us that the siyata d'shmaya, that a person, the divine assistance we receive during Elul, has a semblance of what's going to happen after the coming Mashiach. Just as after coming Mashiach, it will be impossible to sin. There's a greater inclination to mitzvah. There's a greater degree of assistance to do the right thing during this month than any other month of the year. There's that, even though, but again, we have to have a certain awareness that it's available. And if you take the initiative, it's there. And if it's there, what's the degree, the dimension of that assistance? It's something which is out of the ordinary, which doesn't exist throughout the year. This is Umol Hashem es Levavchis Rabzerecho. It has a semblance of after the coming of Mashiach. You say La Milchama Yevecho. When you go out to the world war, the ultimate war, the greatest battle of a person's life is contending with his evil inclination. That's the greatest battle. So here he says, Ubedem derech remes, tizbar haparsha al zeh derech. He says, on an illusionary level, we're able to understand this whole parsha. He called binyan olam b'kiyumo. He says, the existence of this world and the maintenance of this world, toloi b'masa im b'nei Yisrael. It's all dependent on the Jews' behavior, not the Gentiles' behavior. It's all based on the Jews' behavior. Im yativu darkem olam kayim. If the Jews act appropriately, the world continues and exists. As it says in the Pasuk, v'yismu hashamayim v'sogel oretz. David Mel says, heaven will rejoice and the earth will rejoice. Gam Hashem Elokeinu yismach v'yogel bono, and Hashem will rejoice and rejoice with us. V'yushet darkim shel shel tolui, and the appropriate behavior of the Jew is based upon b'nitzochen yetzara, our victory over the evil inclination. That's what is the determining factor. If we walk the right path or we don't walk the right path. Do we succeed in taking control of our lives or not? Well, because of the oil. So what the pasuk is coming to indicate, when the soul leaves the soul world and comes into this world, into the body, as an infused and enters into the physical existence, the soul has to be ready for war. Need a tremendous amount of strength and ability to bring about this victory. It says in Pirkei Avos, who's the strong person? The person who's able to conquer his evil inclination, to suppress his evil inclination. That's the greatest. This is the one called the self-control. This is the ultimate war, to take control of your life and not allow, there's a medrash, do you control your life or does your life control you? The Gemara explains that a person rides a stallion who has tremendous power. If the rider is a trained rider, as powerful as that horse is, the rider controls that horse. Because this rider has the ability and strength to control that horse. But if a person looks at that horse, it looks like the horse is leading the rider. So if the person is not really trained, that horse leads the rider. But if the rider is a person who has the ability, he controls the horse. That's exactly what we're all about. It's like a bronco that hasn't been broken. A human being comes into this world, especially until your bar mitzvah, the evil inclination enters into the person immediately. This moment you're born, and immediately we're subject to all these influences. Now we have to contend with all that conditioning, which is negative conditioning, when we become of intelligence, especially of responsibility, to be able to contend with all that conditioning, which is physical conditioning, and to come to a realization that all its value is purely for spirituality. And the challenges of that challenge is ultimately to accomplish what we're meant to accomplish. Alo Yivecho, you go to war against your enemy. He says, this war is now coming to conquer a city. He says, this is not a war that if you don't want to, you decide that the city is not conquerable, go away. This is an enemy that it's either you or the enemy. If you're not victorious, you're gone. You will be the victim. That's the enemy we're dealing with. If you're slacking in this contention, with this battle, with this enemy, he will destroy you from this world. Whatever share you have in the world to come will be lost. And the Torah gives us a guarantee that although humanly there's no way to conquer this enemy, Hashem will assist you to have the upper hand, to ultimately to succeed if you take the initiative. I always say Avram Avinu was known as the Ivri. Why was Avram known as the Ivri? He's referred to as Ivri. When Lot was taken captive, who informed him that Lot was taken captive? Og Melech HaBashan. He was the giant. He came and he informed Avram that Lot was taken captive. So he came and informed Avram Ivri. At that point, he's mentioned Ivri. Why is he referred to as Ivri? So the Medrash tells us, because Avram Avinu, hu me'ever echad, kol me'ever hasheni. He was on one side of the world, and the whole world was on the other side. He single-handedly took on the world, single-handedly. Avram was one man against the world. That's what he was. And why did he comment? Why is he mentioned Ivri in that particular context? Because the whole concept was Avram Avinu was introducing monotheism. The world was a paganistic world. The four mightiest powers took him captive because they wanted to trap Avram Avinu that if these four mightiest powers destroyed the five kings, there's no question one individual they're going to destroy. And they wanted to destroy Avram Avinu. So the whole concept was an entrapment. So all came to tell the Ivri, knowing that he's a man against the world, there's no way he could win this war. And being a fanatic that he is, he's going to go to battle. But they didn't know that although he's Ivri, but who's his backer? He's one man against the world, but since his backer is Hashem, Avram was guaranteed, and he knew for a fact that he would be victorious. And he defeated the four kings, and he recovered Lot with all his possessions, so on and so forth. That's what happened. So despite the fact, humanly, it seems to be impossible to be victorious, but if you have the right intention and you're on the right side of the fence, Hashem is there with you to assist you to be able to succeed. And that's Hashem Yidnei Biyodo. This Oyev, this enemy, that if you don't stand up against him and you slacken, he will destroy you. But if you take the initiative, although it seems to be impossible, it's not impossible. You should know that he's there to assist you and you will succeed. And that's something you have to understand. Shavisa Shivyo. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit because we don't have as much time to go through it all, but there are other points. It says, when you take the Eish Sifas Toar, you take this woman, it says, Beisiro es simlas shivyi me'aleh. We're talking about the body. The body is the Eish Sifas Toar. It's been contaminated, it's been soiled with sin. You remove that garment, the garment of captivity. The evil inclination took us captive, contaminated us, soiled us with sin. Pirush shekontcha b'shiyoso b'mokum tomei. V'ziyeh al miru kachatoim b'darkei tshuva. How does one cleanse himself from all this spiritual impurity? It's only through darkei tshuva. And it's a mindset. It's assuming a perspective. Mula laki Yisrael baruch hu v'yivchar moka moshevo beis miyuchad leYisrael shu beis hamedrash. And what is that location? It's Veis el beisecho. You must bring her to your home. What's the home of a Jew? Home is that's and during that month, one has to confess and cry and bemoan the fact is that we sinned against our father and mother, meaning against God, and you actually abandoned them. Avio ze HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who's the father of the Jewish people? That's Hashem. Imo hikneses Yisrael. You abandoned the way of a Jew. You didn't behave properly. Yerach Yomim ze shir hamaspik l'shov. A month is enough. Oh, either that, or Yirmos l'chodesh hamiyuchad l'tshuva shechodesh. This parsha is alluding the month that you cry and confess is the month of Elul. And why is the month enough, as I just said, based on what I said earlier? Because there's a special divine intervention, which is a semblance of after coming of Mashiach, that this month, if you have the interest, it's available to give you the ability to take charge of your life and to come to certain realizations and internalizations to be able to appreciate the shortcomings of your behavior throughout the year, which during the year we don't appreciate it. Ato tikones leonos me'aviro me'oro besod omro nefesh omo amelulo v'tzayeu lamo b'derech hanos. Hashem will assist you to be on the proper path. V'tikro ato baleo shet konisa osa b'koch masecho v'omro u'bo'alto gam liyom hatchio tia miuchedes loch larzo l'gufach tamet bo. And a result of doing the tshuva, ultimately, you'll be able to the soul will be reunited with the body, that you'll merit resurrection. Okay, just want to stop this for a moment. It says if a person actually sinned that he deserves to be put to death, he should be displayed on a tree, and you should not allow his remains beyond daytime. He should be buried. Okay, so the simple understanding is that a person deserves to be put to death through stoning. His remains are displayed, but he has to be buried before nightfall, because otherwise the chil Hashem. So Rashi explains, because since man was created in the image of God, it's like, what is it analogous? The Medrash says you have two brothers, identical twins. One's a king and one becomes a bandit. And the bandit, he deserves to be put to death, and they kill him and they hang him up publicly. So when people see the bandit hanging, what do they say? The king is hanging there. The king was hanged because he looks exactly like the king, his brother. So since the Jew says,
Rabbi, the internet's freezing again. Rabbi, the internet's freezing.
But Orach Chaim HaKadosh says again, he explains it like this. Somach Parsha Zu L'Faneo, L'fi Hashem Mesalsel Seder Tikkun Odom. He's speaking about how a person is able to perfect himself. We're talking about the Torah leaders of the generation. How they have to oversee the community, that they should not go astray. Yeah, this? Who's responsible for the community? The Chachmei Ador. If a person, God forbid, a person violates the Torah and he remains defiant, and he did not do tshuva and he passed away without doing tshuva, who's responsible? The Chacham is responsible for this. You should address and attribute it to the eights. Who's the eights? Who's the eights Chaim? If the Chacham, it's due to his failing that the person went astray and he didn't intervene, he's deserving of punishment. The person has the obligation to give to Chacham, to give Musar. The Parshas Kedoshim, and and because he turned a blind eye and didn't want to intervene to tell the people what they have to hear, and the reason why the person ultimately failed and deserved to be taken, who do we attribute this failing to? To the one who did not give him musar because he could have intervened. And very often that's the case. We read the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa, why the Beis Mikdash was destroyed. So Kamsa bar Kamsa, the Torah tells the story, he invited one person, turned up, the enemy showed up, and the person sees him, he says, you have to leave the meat. You have to leave my feast. He says, I'm willing to pay for my portion. He says, no. And all the Chachamim were there at this feast. And he says, you have to leave. He says, I'm willing to pay 50% of whatever this celebration cost. He says, no, you got to leave. He says, I'll pay for everything. He says, you have to leave. He picks him up and throws him out. And he's embarrassed to a level that he's going to take revenge. So he goes to the Romans, goes to Rome, and he says, the Jews, they pray in the temple for your destruction. And he says, I'll prove it to you. Send a sacrifice, an animal for a sacrifice. You'll see what they'll do. They're going to reject it. So you see, they have no consideration for you. They don't revere you. And you see, that's where you should destroy them. So they sent the most quality calf to be brought as a korban. And Kamsa, what he did was, this Bar Kamsa, there's a question what he did. Either he cut the lip of the calf to validate it that it should be blemished, or he cut the eye. Because the blemish was in the eye or the lip. So the commentators explain why was the lip or the eye. So he had a question. If all the Chacham see me being thrown out and being embarrassed publicly, how did they not intervene and say something? How did they allow this to happen? So because they remained silent, that's ultimately why this happened. Or the eye, here they saw what was happening. Seeing such a disgrace, such disgraceful behavior taking place, how do you remain silent? So because of that, that's why, and that's the message you were sending. Either the eye was damaged, was blemished, or the lip was blemished. They should have spoken, they should have seen. And as a result of that, that's why the Beis Mikdash was destroyed. So because the Chachamim did not intervene when they should have intervened, ultimately, it was the Churban. So, and that's really what the pasuk is alluding to. Why this is meant? Because the times where the Chachamim, the Torah leaders, should give Musar and they don't give Musar, it's not always that way, but very often it could be that. And the Gemara tells us in Shavuos, a person has the ability to intervene, and he does not intervene, the liability is on the one who had the ability who did not intervene. And it depends. A person, his family is responsible for his family. The head of the community is responsible for the community. The head of the nation is responsible for the whole nation. And that's exactly what the Torah is alluding to over here. Lo solim. What about if you see a rabbi, a Talmud Chochem, and it seems to be he's doing the wrong thing? Do you have to give him the benefit of the doubt?
Right.
You have to give. He says, "Lo solin nivloso." He says, "Chochem shova aver biyom." The Gemara says in Brochos, "Tahara achra balaylo." Shemos and tshuva. If you see a person even sitting at nighttime, don't even consider that maybe he did tshuva. Elo vaday, he definitely did tshuva. Nobody's perfect. So even the Chochem, the Talmud Chochem, he's not perfect. But even though he's not perfect, but when he realizes imperfection, he corrects it immediately. But if you suspect that he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, there's a claim against you. The sin is like a dead carcass. You have to bury it. You have to totally remove it. Because if you don't, it's a disgrace. If you look at the Rav, where he has a standard that even if he should fail, he would correct it immediately, and you don't, it's a chil Hashem, it's as if you're disgracing God. The Gemara tells us in Shabbos, why was Yerushalayim destroyed? Because they disgraced Talmidei Chachamim. Shenemar v'umalivin. meaning because they did not give the Talmud Chacham the benefit of the doubt, understanding that nobody's perfect and a person could fail, but he makes the correction, and therefore they didn't give them the due respect. That's why Yerushalayim was destroyed. So, I mean, we're approaching it from all sides, ourselves, the Chacham, the people, and especially now during the month of Elul, we have the ability, this extra divine intervention to give us the assistance to see it more clearly, to be able to address whatever this issue is.
Rabbi,
We had said that in regard to one's sustenance, one's earnings, whatever it may be, even if it doesn't work out the way you thought it would work out, God has his reasons, God has his timeline. And just because you said, I need it today, maybe it's not God's time to give it to you today. Maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's some other time. Maybe it's not meant to be. And lo yoser al mazona muma. He receives his sustenance literally to the degree that he needs it. Nothing, no excess whatsoever. Roy lashov liba lomar ashehechen limizoni b'sdei imi tchil shinyani kvi tzorchi. But he says, when I was an infant, a mother naturally nurses a child, and this usually sufficient breast milk to sustain the infant. Also libetov mimenu. And as a result of that, although I only had enough and there was no excess when the mother was nursing the child, and I wasn't hurt by it. So now when I'm receiving just the minimum, just as then I did not receive more than I needed, and that was sufficient, and there was no excess. Now what I'm receiving now, it's for the same reason. Asher hetik osi elov ato. But simsum kvi. The reason why he's giving me this exact amount is because that's what I need. Ultimately, to address the objective of my life, and if you see it in this context, you will be rewarded. What was the whole mentoring process for 40 years? Every day we received a daily stipend of money, only for that day. At the end of the day, it didn't exist any longer. Day in and day out, every day you had to receive your daily stipend. And where were you? You were in the wilderness that if the stipend didn't come the next day, you couldn't survive. It was conditioned us to understand that Hashem provided for us as we're needed. And whatever we need, he provides. And the Navi says, what did we learn when we left Egypt? We left, although they had no provisions. Well, why did they go into the desert? Because they believed that Hashem will provide whatever they need in the desert, which he did. So never forget, as Hashem provided in the desert for us, what we needed, Hashem always provides for us. So although we believe we need more, for whatever reason we believe that, it's a misunderstanding of the reality of what you need. So therefore, your level of disappointment is only because of your expectation, which is created by yourself.
Rabbi, if you go back to Egypt, the Jewish people had witnessed, 9-10 months of plagues or whatever it was, and suffered horrible slavery.
The slavery stopped by the plagues. Once the plague started, there was no longer slavery.
And so I'm just reacting to your comment that they had this horrible existence. They witnessed these plagues, and then somebody sort of says, it's time to go. Was it really an affirmative belief that Hashem, it just seems to me it's like, it's time to go, we're out of here. I'm not really thinking about next week and the provisions I need for next week or next month. Or what. I'm like, it's like we were slaves. It was horrible. Hashem redeemed us. We're out. I'll figure out next week. So I'm just asking the question about there was an affirmative belief that Hashem's going to provide for us. I'm like thinking about the chaotic nature of the situation.
After the plague of darkness, 80% of the Jews died. right? Only 20% left.
Right.
At the time of the last plague, there were only 20% Jews left, and they understood after that plague, they're leaving. They were told they were leaving. The question is, if they were told they were leaving, I once heard the question from Moshe Feinstein, Zichron Baruch, if they told them, why did they prepare provisions? Right? That's the question. So he explained that, you can only experience disappointment so many times. There were times, multiple times during this period, during the plagues, Paro said, I'm sending you out. And the Jews heard this, and they were all charged up. And all of a sudden, Paro said, I'm not sending you out. And went back and forth and back, even after the hailstorm, the hail, which Paro spoke like about Tshuva. He says, I'm the sinner, I'm sending you out. He reneged. And then there was the locust. It never stopped. So the Jews, how many times could you be disappointed? So therefore, even when they were told, now we're going out, they said, you know something? When we see it, we're going to believe we can't experience that level of disappointment anymore. As a result of that, that's why they did not provide provisions. So he said the reason why the matzah was matzah is because they rushed out, because they didn't believe in reality that they were going out. So he said matzah is an indication of a lack of belief. Because they did not believe, that's why the matzah was didn't have time to leaven. Just tell me how how. So he says, what does the matzah represent? So he said like this: that they believed that they were going out, that was their own assessment of that reality. The reality is that God never said they were going out. Paro said he sent them out. It was their reading of the script. So that they believed they were going out, that was their own self. That was the cause. Was the disappointment was based on their own assessment. The only time God said they were going out was after the 10th plague. So therefore, it was as a result of their misunderstanding of their reality. That's why they did not believe when Moshe says God said you're going out. So what does the matzah represent? Then what God says you're going, it's reality. That's why we eat the matzah. The matzah is a result of the lack of belief. But the lack of belief is because it was based on our own assessment. But when God says go out, you're going out. And when God says go out, and therefore, but they did go out. They didn't have provisions. That's lech. I will never forget the chesed you did. You had faith that I would provide whatever you need in the midbar. Because when you realized you were going out, that was the confirmation that in retrospect, your original assessments were based on yourself and not what I said. That I'm just telling what Moshe Feinstein said.